Imagine an elite, brilliant philosopher just, walking out of the greatest library in the ancient world.
Right, just packing up and leaving.
Yeah, and he crosses an ocean only to stumble directly into the bloody footprint of an apostle who had been flayed alive an entire century earlier.
It is wild. We are talking about two vastly different worlds here.
Completely different operating systems of reality, honestly.
Yeah.
And they are connected by this single lost book in a port town in India. So, welcome to today's deep dive where we are taking you on this crazy, continent-spanning historical mystery.
And we are pulling this narrative together from a pretty massive stack of sources today.
Right, yeah. Encyclopedias of early Christian writings, classical historical records from Eusebius and Saint Jerome, the visionary accounts of Anne Catherine Emmerich, and some modern scholarly studies on Orthodox missions.
It is a lot of material to go through.
It is. But our mission for this deep dive is to figure out how a second-century intellectual heavyweight just abandoned his comfortable academic empire. Like, why go debate Hindu philosophers only to uncover this surreal, deeply violent trail of Saint Bartholomew?
It is a massive historical puzzle.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Okay.
Because we have to start in the 2nd century with a man named Pantaenus. And, looking at his early life in Sicily, he is the absolute last person you would expect to become a Christian missionary.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Pantaenus was not raised in a Christian environment at all. He was deeply entrenched in Hellenistic philosophy.
He was a Stoic.
Yeah, exactly. A highly trained Stoic. And, when we hear Stoic today, we often just think of someone who, suppresses their emotions.
Right, like the guy who doesn't cry at movies.
Yeah, exactly. But in the ancient world, Stoicism was this elite, rigorous intellectual discipline. It was the belief that the universe is governed by a divine, rational order called the Logos.
Okay, so it was much more systematic.
Very much so. A true Stoic's entire life was dedicated to mastering logic and aligning their personal duty with that cosmic natural order. I mean, this was the philosophy of emperors and the highly educated Roman elite.
Which means his conversion to early Christianity is just this massive societal and intellectual pivot.
Oh, it's huge.
I look at this and it reminds me of like a modern-day hardcore tech CEO. Someone at the absolute pinnacle of Silicon Valley logic, wealth, status.
That must be a good comparison.
Yeah, and they suddenly drop their entire life, sell all their shares, and just walk out the door to become a barefoot monastic. It's a complete rewrite of how you interact with the world.
It is a massive pivot, yes.
Yeah.
But the thing is, don't mistake it for a total abandonment of his past.
What do you mean?
Well, he didn't just throw away his rigorous logic, he basically weaponized it for a new cause.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, for a respected Stoic to embrace a faith that was, at the time, still viewed with deep suspicion by the Roman elite, it required a profound paradigm shift. But Pantaenus sought to reconcile his new faith with Greek philosophy.
So he's combining them.
Exactly. He brought his elite analytical framework right into this emerging, often misunderstood religion.
And he was so successful at synthesizing these two worlds that his most famous student, Clement of Alexandria, gave him one of the greatest nicknames in ancient history.
The Sicilian bee.
The Sicilian bee. I love that so much.
That was great, right?
Yeah.
Clement used that specific imagery to describe Pantaenus as a man tirelessly flying from text to text.
Buzzing around the library.
Literally.
Yep.
Clement actually wrote that Pantaenus was gathering the spoil of the flowers of the prophetic and apostolic meadow. But, he was also pulling from the meadows of Greek philosophy.
So he's getting the best of both.
Right. He extracted the absolute best intellectual nectar from each distinct tradition to create a theology that was entirely new, robust, and nourishing for the ancient mind.
And he puts that nectar to work when he moves to Alexandria, Egypt, around 190 A.D. He becomes the head of the Catechetical School of Alexandria, which is also known as the Didaskalion.
Which is a really big deal.
Huge deal. Because before Pantaenus showed up, this school was basically just offering simple entry-level initiation classes for new converts, like Christianity 101.
Yeah, that very basic stuff.
But he turns it into a massive theological seminary. He starts teaching the humanities, classical literature, and logic right alongside theology.
He really scaled it up.
He extends the curriculum so far that it actually begins to rival the pagan Ptolemaic Museum, which is the famous institution that housed the Great Library of Alexandria.
He essentially legitimized Christian scholarship on a global stage. I mean, under his leadership, the school became the first and foremost institution of theological learning in Christian antiquity.
That is quite the resume.
And he didn't just elevate the high-minded philosophy, he actually changed the mechanics of how everyday people accessed information. The sources note that he promoted the use of the Coptic alphabet to replace antiquated Demotic characters.
And we should probably break down why that matters, because for you listening, that might just sound like a simple font change, but it really wasn't.
No, not at all.
The old Egyptian Demotic script was incredibly complex, and it was heavily tied to the traditional pagan priestly castes. So by ditching that and promoting Coptic, which basically adapted the familiar Greek alphabet to write the local Egyptian language, Pantaenus was essentially open-sourcing theology.
That is exactly what he was doing.
He was stripping away the bureaucratic barriers and making complex philosophical and spiritual ideas accessible to the everyday Egyptian.
It was a total revolution in communication. So he is at the absolute peak of his academic career, functioning as the primary architect of this new intellectual empire in Alexandria. But then a deputation from India arrives in the city.
Right, because Alexandria was a massive global trade hub.
Yeah, it was connected to India via the Red Sea and the monsoon winds. So these Indian delegates interact with Pantaenus, and according to historical records from Saint Jerome, they are just so blown away by his erudition that they make a formal request.
They want to poach him.
Basically, yeah. They want him to travel to India to debate their own Hindu philosophers, specifically the Brahmins and the Gymnosophists.
Gymnosophists, being the ancient Indian philosophers, the Greeks literally called naked wise men, ascetics who lived deep in the forests, rejecting material wealth to debate the fundamental nature of reality.
Right. So the Bishop of Alexandria, Demetrius, is faced with this radical choice. Pantaenus is his star player. He is the engine driving the success of the entire Alexandrian school.
So what does he do?
Demetrius makes a decision that really illustrates a vital mechanism of the early church's mindset. He pulls his top academic scholar right out of the school and sends him east as a missionary.
Wow. Just packs him up and ships him out.
Yeah. The intellectual debates and the safety of Alexandria were important, obviously, but engaging with the broader, uncharted world was considered the ultimate calling. The mandate to spread the message just completely superseded the comfort of established academia.
So the Sicilian bee leaves the safety of the greatest library on earth and sets sail for the absolute edge of the map. And drawing from modern studies by scholars like Perumal and Moraes in our sources, we know he traveled to the Konkan coast in the Bombay region.
Yes, specifically landing in an ancient port town called Kalyan.
And the Greeks actually referred to this region as India Felix, right?
Yeah, because
Wow.
Kalyan basically translates to Felix, or happy.
Okay, so put yourself in Pantaenus' sandals as he arrives in Kalyan. I mean, he has survived this arduous, months-long journey across the sea.
Which was incredibly dangerous back then.
Extremely. And he is intellectually armed to the teeth with Stoic logic and Christian theology. He's preparing to introduce these concepts to the brilliant ascetics of India. He expects to be this grand pioneer, breaking completely new ground.
But, and this is the wild part, he steps off the boat and makes a stunning discovery. There is already a Christian community operating there.
Right. And they don't just have oral traditions, which would be surprising, that they have a physical relic. The locals possess a copy of the Gospel of Matthew, written in Hebrew letters.
Eusebius actually records that when Pantaenus asked the locals about the origins of this text, they revealed it had been left there by the Apostle Bartholomew over a century earlier.
Okay. And if you're listening and wondering why an Indian port town possessing a text in Hebrew letters is such a massive theological big deal, you really have to look at the ancient trade routes and the languages of the time.
Right, because Greek was the lingua franca of the Mediterranean.
Exactly. Almost all early Christian texts that spread westward were in Greek.
So finding a Hebrew or Aramaic gospel all the way in India proves that this wasn't some, secondary translated mission trickling down through Roman trade channels.
No, it means the raw, original first-generation Jewish Christian movement made it all the way to the coast of Bombay in the 1st century.
They bypassed the Mediterranean filter entirely.
It is a profound historical intersection. And Pantaenus recognized the immense value of this physical manuscript, and he actually eventually brought it back with him to Alexandria.
But before we trace the origins of that text back to Bartholomew, we do have to look at the massive theological friction that Pantaenus' legacy sparked centuries later. Oh, yeah. Because when you mix the Stoic belief in a unifying cosmic logos with early Christian theology, the implications get incredibly complex.
Really complex.
There is a fierce academic debate regarding what Pantaenus actually taught, regarding the ultimate fate of humanity. In the 19th century, scholars like J.W. Hansen strongly argued that Pantaenus and his subsequent Alexandrian school taught universalism.
And just to clarify for you guys, universalism is the belief in universal salvation. The idea that ultimately every single soul will be reconciled to God.
Right. And if you approach theology with a Stoic mindset, believing that the universe is governed by a rational, unifying order, it makes logical sense that all fragmented souls would eventually be pulled back into that perfect divine order.
But modern scholarship offers a pretty heavy pushback on that. Scholars like Andrew C. Itter argue against that 19th century view.
Yeah, Itter points out that if you look closely at the legacy of Pantaenus and his student Clement, there is a massive, unresolved tension between human free will and salvation.
Because you can't force someone to be saved, right?
Exactly. Itter argues that they didn't teach a strict, guaranteed universal salvation, because forcing salvation upon someone would completely override the soul's autonomy to refuse it.
And we should state clearly here, we aren't taking sides in this debate. We're just reporting what the sources say.
Oh, absolutely. We're not here to declare a winner.
But it is the ultimate theological friction point. Does a divine rational victory mean everyone is saved by default? Or does human free will mean an individual can eternally choose to walk away?
It highlights exactly why Pantaenus was so historically vital. His integration of Greek philosophical rigor created a framework robust enough to host these massive, nuanced debates for millennia.
It sounds like the core of the debate is whether grace is like a gravitational pull that eventually drags every single comet into the sun regardless of its trajectory, or if humans are equipped with the thrusters to permanently break orbit.
That is a great way to put it. That captures the tension perfectly. And this tension between Pantaenus' elite, rational logic and his faith is exactly what makes his discovery in India so jarring.
Because of Bartholomew.
Right. The man who left that Hebrew gospel behind Bartholomew, he didn't conquer the ancient world with Stoic syllogisms. He operated in a world of raw, terrifying, supernatural power.
I have to admit, I struggle to square this. You have Pantaenus, this rigorous, highly logical academic, dedicating his life to a text left by Bartholomew. But when we look at the historical and traditional accounts of Bartholomew, especially the visions of Anne Catherine Emmerich in our sources, the stories are filled with magic, silencing idols, commanding demons.
It's a completely different vibe.
Completely. Bartholomew travels this geographically wild route passing through Japan, returning via Arabia and the Red Sea, down into Abyssinia, which is modern-day Ethiopia. And everywhere he goes, the fabric of physical reality just bends around him. How did a purely logical Stoic reconcile himself with a tradition built on these wild supernatural events?
To understand that, we really have to understand how the ancient mind, even a highly educated Stoic mind, viewed reality. For them, the line between literal history and spiritual reality was incredibly porous.
Like, they didn't separate the physical and spiritual the way we do.
Exactly. The physical world was deeply infused with the spiritual. So when we read the defining narrative of Bartholomew's mission, the silencing of the idol, we have to look at the mechanics of what is actually happening.
Right. The sources detail this specific event where Bartholomew confronts a local pagan idol, which was often associated with the demon Astaroth, and the populace believed this idol was miraculously healing them.
And notice how he handles it. He doesn't just, physically smash the stone statue with a hammer.
He doesn't just break the rock.
Right. In the ancient worldview, an idol wasn't just a block of carved rock. It was the focal point of real adversarial spiritual forces. Bartholomew uses spiritual authority. He commands the entity inhabiting the idol to reveal the truth.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he forces the spirit to publicly confess that its supposed healings were just illusions. It was a deception specifically designed to keep the people trapped in a cycle of fear and idol worship.
So exposing the illusion is the actual miracle.
Precisely. And for a Stoic philosopher like Pantaenus, centuries later, that narrative wouldn't just read like a fairy tale. It reads as the ultimate victory of the logos, the divine truth over irrational deception.
That makes so much sense.
Right. When Bartholomew forces a demon to unmask its own illusions, it functions as a profound narrative of supreme liberation. It frees the human mind from false systems.
And the impact of that specific liberation was immediate. King Polemius, witnessing this absolute public unmasking of his local deity, is converted and baptized along with his entire household. Bartholomew then takes that very pagan temple and consecrates it into a church.
But, liberation in the ancient world rarely came without a brutal cost. Upsetting the established religious and economic order of a region was incredibly dangerous.
And this is where the story of Bartholomew takes a really dark, violent turn.
Very dark.
He is in Greater Armenia, in a place called Albanopolis, around 69 or 71 AD. His massive success, especially the conversion of King Polemius, deeply angers the priests of the old cult. So they report him to the king's brother, Astyages, who orders Bartholomew's arrest.
And his final moments, his transitus, are among the most gruesome in early Christian history.
It's honestly hard to read about.
It is. He is martyred by being flayed.
Skinned alive.
Yes, methodically skinned alive, which is an agonizing process that severs the nerve endings while keeping the victim entirely conscious before he was ultimately beheaded. And the tradition holds that even while he was enduring this unimaginable torture, he continued to preach to the crowds.
It's an image that has entirely defined his legacy in art and culture. Like if you go to the Sistine Chapel today and look at Michelangelo's incredible fresco, The Last Judgment, you will see Saint Bartholomew.
Yes, holding the knife.
Right. He is depicted holding a flaying knife in one hand and his own empty, hollowed-out skin draped casually in the other. It is haunting. Spanish paintings also frequently depict him alongside a chained demon, referencing that absolute authority he wielded over the idols.
What's fascinating here is how the early church enshrined the visceral reality of that martyrdom right into the everyday lives of laborers.
Oh, what do you mean?
Well, because of the specific brutal nature of his torture, his official patronages became intensely literal. He was named the patron saint of tanners, leatherworkers, shoemakers, and bookbinders.
Basically anyone who works with animal skins.
Exactly.
He's also, notably, the patron saint of neurological diseases and twitching.
Yes, which is a direct physiological reference to the severing of the nervous system during the flaying process. They didn't sanitize his death at all. They connected his suffering directly to human ailments and hard physical labor.
After his execution, his followers managed to recover his body, and the fate of his relics perfectly mirrors the sprawling, nomadic nature of his entire life.
They are everywhere.
Literally across the globe. There's the St. Bartholomew Monastery in eastern Turkey. There are relics at the Basilica of San Bartolomeo in Benevento, Italy. Parts of him are in Rome, at Canterbury Cathedral in England, and in the cathedrals of Frankfurt and Siena.
And his reputation as the ultimate boundary-pushing missionary was so strong that it even bled into early science fiction.
I love this part.
In the 17th century, the philosopher Francis Bacon wrote a famous utopian novel called New Atlantis.
Right, and in New Atlantis, Bacon imagines this highly advanced, perfectly isolated society called Ben Salem. They're entirely cut off from the corruption of the rest of the world. But the story notes that 20 years after the ascension of Christ, an ark floats onto their shores.
A literal floating ark.
Yeah, and inside this floating ark is a letter and a copy of the Bible. And the letter is written by St. Bartholomew declaring that an angel told him to set the ark afloat on the ocean.
It's so telling. Bacon, trying to conceptualize how a perfectly isolated utopian society could possibly receive the gospel, chooses Bartholomew as the delivery mechanism.
Because he's the guy who goes the furthest.
Exactly. In the cultural imagination, Bartholomew is the one who reaches the unreachable. He is the apostle of the absolute frontier. If an uncharted island needs the truth, it's Bartholomew who gets it there.
So let's trace this massive web one more time. You have an apostle in the 1st century, traveling to the very edges of the known map, wielding raw supernatural authority, and eventually suffering a horrific death, flayed alive in Armenia.
Right.
But before he dies, he leaves behind a physical text, a Gospel of Matthew written in Hebrew, in an ancient port town in India.
And then a century passes. The geopolitical landscape shifts entirely. And in the intellectual epicenter of the Roman Empire, a highly educated Stoic philosopher named Pantaenus experiences a radical shift in his own worldview.
Right. He rises to the top of the academic ladder, revolutionizing how theology is taught in Alexandria, only to be called out into the wild.
He gives up the comfort of the library, crosses the sea relying on the monsoon trade winds, and finds that Hebrew text waiting for him in India.
The elite intellectual and the flayed martyr, connected across 100 years by a single manuscript. It is a profound testament to how knowledge and ideas travel across vast distances, how they mutate, how they survive against incredible odds, and how they ultimately shape human history.
Pantaenus did what any great scholar would do, really. He recognized the immense historical and theological value of what he found, and he brought that original Hebrew Gospel of Matthew back with him to the great library of Alexandria.
He brought the wild, dangerous frontier back to the safe center of learning.
Exactly.
But here's a final thought I want you to mull over. Pantaenus brought that priceless foundational text back to Alexandria. But as we know, the great library of Alexandria and the brilliant institutions surrounding it were eventually destroyed.
Erased by history.
Fire, war, and time erased millions of pages of human history. That Hebrew Gospel of Matthew, it's completely lost. We only have the Greek versions today, which makes you wonder, if a text as significant as an original apostolic gospel could be discovered by sheer chance in a port town in India, only to be lost again in the fires of Alexandria, what other lost foundational texts might still be buried right now, preserved in the sands of history? Just waiting for the next curious traveler to step out of their comfort zone, step off the map, and stumble upon them.
The map is never truly finished.
No, it isn't. So keep exploring. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.